Hello, and thank you for watching our presentation video on Academic Writing Style Guide Development Project, developing the Sophia Academic Writing Guide, or we call it the SAWG. There are three of us presenting today: Regan Tyndall, Katsuya Yokomoto, and myself, John Duplice. All three of us are doctoral candidates and currently working as lecturers at the Center for Language Education and Research at Sophia University in Tokyo. Our presentation is broken into the following parts. First, background and rationale, narrated by myself. Second, contents of the Sophia Academic Writing Guide, narrated by Regan. And third, the focus group discussion and questionnaire results, narrated by Katsuya. And finally, I'll describe plans for the SAWG going forward. So I'll start today by describing the background and rationale for the SAWG. The background for the SAWG comes from teaching first-year university classes focused on English for academic purposes, known as Academic Communication, or AC1, in the spring semester. This class places a lot of emphasis on academic writing, as well as reading, listening, speaking, and presenting. This is a two-part program with the second semester in the fall consisting of Academic Communication 2. Academic Communication 2 is a CLIL, or a Content Language Integrated Learning class, where students can choose a teacher and class they're interested in taking, so long as it is at the same English level as the first semester class. The CLIL classes range from history type classes, maybe English classes, but based on history or maybe culture. There may be psychology, all kinds of different themes students can study English in context. The rationale for the SAWG stems from a need for standardized objectives and materials. Since the program has both full and part-time teachers, making sure all students receive foundational academic writing skills that can be used in future classes is needed. Many students change instructors in the second semester of Academic Communication 2. And from this change, many second semester teachers have noticed and commented that students lacked, or some students lacked, foundational writing skills and would therefore need to reteach what was being learned in the first semester in AC1. So for example, maybe you have 70% of your students came back to your class for AC2, but 30% were from a different teacher. Those 30% may not have the same foundational skills that you taught in your first semester class, and you may end up having to reteach those skills again. So the foundational writing objectives and materials that are needed to be standardized include the following. Need for APA. We found there was a little bit of confusion with some teachers wanting to teach MLA, and then the students would change to a different class later that was APA focused, or vice versa. And then there was also situations where the students were getting confused about which is which. And so we decided to standardize use APA for all classes, and then in future classes the teachers want to teach MLA, they just teach from APA to MLA, but there'll be a standardized APA for all students. The basic citation and referencing skills, these are needed for all levels. Essay structuring was another aspect that makes sure we all have the same kind of structure style and how to structure and put together essays. Basic word processing mechanics. A lot of students came in not knowing how to set up a Word document or prepare that. So we wanted to include some basic steps to get the student started on using Word in the SAWG. And paraphrasing and summarizing, this is another key area that we want to include in SAWG with lots of examples that the students could use to imitate, to get ideas of how they can phrase things and how it should look in their paper. And then finally, standardized reference materials for all class levels. So since we have elementary or intermediate or elementary or introductory level all the way up through advanced 2, A2 through C1, there's quite a range here. So we wanted something standardized where all class levels could use together. So next, Regan will be discussing what's in the SAWG and the contents of the SAWG.
Thanks, John. So hi, everybody. I'm Regan. I'm going to talk to you about the contents of our Sophia Academic Writing Guide. So I'll just give you a short overview for a few minutes. First of all, the guide is written in English, though there are a few Japanese translations. It's about 42 pages long right now, though that includes the example essay at the end. And so far, the guide has been shared with our colleagues in PDF format only, that is, in digital format. Of course, it is printable, but so far it's only been shared online. So this writing guide actually has 6 chapters. The first chapter is simply paragraph and essay. And it includes familiar topics such as what is a paragraph, what does it look like, what is an essay, and so on. You'll see an illustration like this where we see an example paragraph. Obviously the purpose here is to show students the physical structure of the paragraph as there's no content. And the topic sentence and concluding sentence are highlighted in yellow, so that's quite easy to see. There are also some brief explanations. This one's a little bit more detailed. It's what is a thesis statement. So this can be considered a reference for teachers as well. Chapter 2 of the guide is about indirect quotation. So that is paraphrasing and summarizing. There is an illustration like this to show students the basic physical layout difference between the two. And then there's a source text, which in this case is about baseball in the United States, the origins of baseball. This example text is about 400 and some words long. And following it, that text is first paraphrased. You see part of the paraphrase here. And then it's summarized into about 120 words, as you can see here on screen. So there are examples of both. Next, chapter 3 is about direct quotations, so using quotation marks in your essay. There's an example from a student source book, such as you might find in the library. Like this, the topic is students who go abroad to study. And there are a bunch of examples of how a student would quote that source. So for example, here's student A, student B, student C, and student D. And each one is doing a direct quotation of a sort, but each is a little bit different. You'll see, for example, student D at the bottom has quoted the original author, but also included ellipsis to show where some words have been deleted. Okay, there's also student E who has chosen to quote the source text with a really long quotation of more than 40 words. Of course, in APA format, that requires the quotation to be offset from the left margin. So also an example of that. Now, because chapters 2 and 3 are about quoting, we also have included a plagiarism note, which of course tells students that they must give credit to the original writers or original sources, regardless of to what degree they are borrowing information. Next, chapter 4 is about APA style itself, particularly for in-text citation and the reference list. So there are examples of how to put the author's names into sentences in the essay, as you see at the bottom of the screen, with the citations in yellow. There's also this chart to show how to refer to authors by name, particularly when there are more than one author, and referring to the first time the author's names are mentioned and the subsequent times the names are mentioned. Okay, and of course there are details of exactly how to cite different types of sources. On screen you can see things like books with one author, books with two authors, a Japanese language source, academic journals, and so on. Next, Chapter 5 is about setting up the computer to use Microsoft Word for APA style. So we have topics like the 1-inch margin around the paper, the Times New Roman letter font, double spacing, inserting page numbers, paragraphs, and so on. This chapter includes some illustrations, such as you see here. This is obviously a box that would appear on Microsoft Word if you're working with the paragraph function. And in the text explanation above, you can see there are some Japanese translations, just to help those students whose computers are set to Japanese, because of course they will probably see these Microsoft Word functions in Japanese. Finally, Chapter 6 is the sample essay I referred to. And this essay is about 9 or 10 pages long. It has a title page, you can see it very small on the left, and then thereafter follows several pages of paragraph-based text in APA format. We tried to make this essay a little bit like that of maybe a third-year student at university. And of course, it includes the references list at the end. We tried to have as many different types of references as possible. You'll note, for example, this one has on the bottom a Japanese language source. So it's good to show an example of that. Okay, that's all. And next, Katsuya is going to talk to you about our discussion and questionnaire survey of our colleagues regarding the writing guide.
Thanks, Regan. Hi, I'm Katsuya Yokomoto. I'm going to talk to you about the focus group discussion and the questionnaire regarding the Sophia Academic Writing Guide. In the spring semester, the teachers used the Sophia Academic Writing Guide for the first time, and after the semester, we conducted the focus group discussion and the questionnaire online in order to elicit the teachers' opinions about the Sophia Academic Writing Guide. So during the focus group discussion, we asked those things. First, how teachers use the Sophia Academic Writing Guide, and also we asked for suggestions for improvement. In the questionnaire, we asked the teachers to rate how useful each of the sections was on the 4-point Likert scale, and at the end of each chapter, we included an open-ended question to elicit suggestions for improvement of the guide. Because of the limited time we have for this presentation, we are going to focus on the section that the teachers rated not useful. And Chapter 1 has 2 sections that received not useful rating from the teachers. And this is a summary of the responses in the focus group discussion and open-ended questions in the questionnaire for Chapter 1. In terms of the paragraph writing section, they wanted to have a sample paragraph using actual words instead of a non-word paragraph. And they wanted to have more explanation about and examples of a topic sentence. Especially, they wanted to have good and bad examples of a topic sentence to compare. And also, they wanted to have a step-by-step guide on how to develop a paragraph. In terms of an essay writing section, they wanted to have a concrete examples of the thesis statement, just like in the topic sentence. And they wanted to have a more explanation about how to write a thesis statement. And this could be true for other sections as well. They suggested that we put some materials for exercises and practice online and put the QR codes for that online material so that the students can access to that materials for self-study. As to chapter 2, at least some of the teachers rated those 3 sections as not useful. So we are going to focus on these 3 sections. And this slide shows the major suggestions that the teachers gave in the focus group discussion and questionnaire for chapter 2. In terms of the reading passage section, the teachers wanted to have a separate examples and separate passages for paraphrasing and summarizing because the current version has only one passage for both paraphrasing and summarizing, which could confuse students in terms of the difference between paraphrasing and summarizing. And in terms of the paraphrasing section, the teachers wanted to have more examples. Especially they wanted to have a simple examples first to show what the paraphrase is to a lower level student and have more complex example later on. And they wanted to have sample sentence and paraphrase placed side by side so that the students can compare what the original sentence looked like and the paraphrase sentence look like. In terms of the summarizing section, they wanted to have a sample passage and summary placed side by side so that they can compare the original text and the summary. Because the purpose of having paraphrasing and summarizing is a kind of avoiding plagiarism and self-plagiarism, so they wanted to have a kind of part to touch upon avoiding plagiarism and self-plagiarism in this chapter. Chapter 3 didn't have any sections rated as not useful, but chapter 4 has these 3 sections rated as not useful, at least by some teachers. This slide shows the major suggestions for chapter 4. The section of example paragraph with in-text citations, some of the examples were not clear to some of the teachers, so we need to fix them. Another thing was the academic language use, because this section is introducing in-text citations, so the language should be academic. So we need to introduce what academic language is by comparing between formal and informal language use. In the other section, examples when citing from a web page, we included several examples, but what was missing in the current guide was how to cite secondary sources. The students wanted to use secondary sources sometimes, so we might want to include that. And another thing is students tend to use more works in Japanese in their writing, so the teachers wanted to have more examples on how to cite works in Japanese instead of only one example in the current version. One other thing is that some teachers wanted to have a link to APA blog for other types of publications that we could not include in the current version because of the page limitation. It's a great idea to show other types of publications, and it promotes the students' self-learning about how to cite things in their writing. And chapters 5 and 6 didn't have any section that received not useful rating. So now John will discuss a possible revision plan.
Thank you, Katsuya. Finally, I would like to talk about the SAWG going forward. So now with SAWG, we've got a lot of information from the first semester that we've gathered. And so there's some changes we want to implement. Some of the possible revisions include simpler explanations or examples of paraphrasing, especially for the introductory level classes, topic sentence and thesis statement explanations and examples, QR codes for further practice. Some teachers wanted maybe further practice through a QR code that they can assign. Citation and secondary source explanation. This is something we didn't include, the secondary sources that some teachers asked for. Avoiding plagiarism and self-plagiarism is another addition we're thinking about revising and including in the next edition. And shorter sample essays for beginner levels. The one we have in currently would seem like it was too long for the beginning levels. We also have the SAWG committee that will be going forward so that in the future, even after we are gone from Sophia, the committee can continue to revise and adapt the SAWG for future classes. So this concludes our presentation, and on behalf of Regan, Katsuya, and myself, we'd like to thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.